Hi.
Hello. Thanks for
Hey.
joining early, Joe, and thank you to our attendees for joining early. We'll be getting started right here at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so just about 3 minutes. Okay, Joe, it is now 11 a.m. Let's go ahead and get started.
Right. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Barrett Boone with RedChip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with Inspira Technologies, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol IINN. With us today, we have Joe Hayon, President and co-founder of Inspira Technologies. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we'll open up the event for Q&A. I will keep everyone's lines muted throughout the presentation. Users may ask a question at any time by using the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom window. Now, before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical fact should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. With that said, I will now turn the call over to Joe. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. So as you know, Inspira is a company traded on the NASDAQ. We've been on the NASDAQ since July 2021. And the company was set up for the purpose to provide an alternative or a different type of solution that could potentially help prevent the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. Unfortunately, in many cases, if a patient has acute respiratory failure, this is your only choice. But we believe that you should have additional choices. And therefore, we are working towards creating a new class of respiratory care. Now, you should be able to choose, or we hope that the future will allow you to choose between having acute respiratory failure and requiring mechanical ventilation, which requires intubation and coma. We would like to work and propose a different types of a solution through our product, which is called the Inspira Art, which is being designed to treat patients with acute respiratory failure, But as opposed of going through the lungs, we talk about bypassing the lungs by going directly into the blood, into the vein, and oxygenating the blood. We plan to treat patients using this product in the future, used while they are awake and breathing spontaneously. In other words, without the need of intubation, without the need for coma, and without the need to shut down the lungs. Now, Inspira is working towards leading the industry, and we have more than one product today in our portfolio or pipeline that we are developing. So on the left-hand side, we have the Inspira Art, which is a respiratory support system. In the center, we have the Atlas, which is a type of life support, often used in cardiopulmonary bypass procedures or like an ECMO. This is often used for very extreme cases where everything is often failed. And on the right-hand side, we have another product we are working on, which is called the Hyla blood sensor. What makes the blood sensor so unique is that it is non-invasive. In other words, it's designed to be clipped over a tube that has blood flowing through it. And using the optical sensor with advanced algorithms, we are able to identify specific blood parameters and provide ongoing and continuous measurements. Now, to focus on the ARC is being designed as a new class of acute respiratory care. It is designed using our augmented respiration technology designed to reduce the need potentially for invasive mechanical ventilation. Now, this is a very, very big market. There are millions of people every single year requiring invasive mechanical ventilation. Some reports will show up to 20 million people per year worldwide. We've already identified a potential market of about 600,000 patients in the US, which we identify as our initial target population when the product be ready and we would choose to penetrate the market. Now, we are looking at a product which we project will have many benefits, including to assist, and as opposed to shutting down the sick lungs, we're taking a different approach and working towards assisting the compromised lung. And we would do this by oxygenating a reduced volume of blood, therefore boosting oxygen saturation levels in just minutes. So just to give you a bit of an overview, I'm talking about a procedure whereby a cannula would be inserted into the right jugular vein in the neck. This is a dual lumen cannula, which means it has both an inlet and an outlet. The benefit being is that it is short and therefore will allow for movement, but it will also mean there's only one insertion point in the patient. Now, we would remove a small quantity of blood of about 1 liter per minute to 1.5 liters per minute. This blood will go through the ART system, go through the removal of carbon dioxide, the charging of oxygenation, an oxygenation process, and hopefully when this enriched blood flows back to the patient, it will boost the patient's oxygen saturation levels in just a few minutes. Should we succeed, we'll be able to treat patients while they're awake and without shutting down the lungs, and therefore to prevent the need for intubation and coma. And of course, weaning, that dreadful process of trying to get a patient off the machine. And now, why is it dreadful? Because it's extremely time consuming. In a sense, for every day that a person's on a mechanical ventilator, you need a day to get them off the machine. So you understand it's a vicious circle when there are complications and risks involved. Now, we believe that should we be able to develop and deliver the Inspira Art, it will allow the medical community to treat a much larger population, and potentially it has the capability to be deployed outside of ICUs, making this highly required medical treatment available to millions that do not really have proper access to ICU levels of care. Now, acute respiratory failure is a growing market. We all came very educated with this field due to COVID. But to be quite honest, there are millions every year that require mechanical ventilation. The market is expected to grow. There's an increasing prevalence of both diseases like COPD, about 50 million in the US, about 80 million worldwide. And this number is growing dramatically, unfortunately. There's also a growing a level of respiratory infection, pneumonia. More and more people are contracting respiratory infections, and unfortunately, they end up in hospitals. I can tell you, even on a personal level, I've had family. My father, in the last 6 months, has been in hospital twice because of their respiratory infections, with the last visit ending up on BPAP, which is a type of non-invasive mechanical ventilation, and then that weaning process. And it's a very difficult procedure for someone who's in their golden ages. And some are not that fortunate to actually leave the hospital. Now, above this, we also have to take into consideration that there is a growing elderly population that are extremely vulnerable to respiratory infections and medical diseases, and therefore mechanical ventilation or invasive mechanical ventilation, as we know it, is not potentially the best choice for them. Now, what is Inspira really trying to do? We're trying to fill in a respiratory gap, because on the left-hand side, you can see that when is what's called a high-flow nasal cannula. And why is this important to explain this to you? In a sense, if God forbid you have a respiratory problem and you're brought into the ICU, the doctors will try to treat you with some type of oxygen supplement. And they'll use a high-flow nasal cannula or some type of oxygen mask or non-invasive ventilator like BPAP or CPAP. But in many cases, it's just enough. The patient will continue to deteriorate. Different parameters, key indexes will continue to deteriorate, and the doctors will have no choice but to move the patient to invasive mechanical ventilation, which means they're going to run immediately, place the patient to a coma. They have to intubate them, shut down the lungs, and have the machine take over while they try to take care of the underlying medical problem. And this could take days and weeks. But unfortunately, invasive mechanical ventilation has many risks, and I'll go into them in just a minute. So there's really a gap here. There's a gap between a very simple oxygen supplement to providing life support, because invasive mechanical ventilation is defined as life support, a last resort by the FDA. And we believe that Inspira could potentially provide a solution that will fill this gap between a first line of defense and a type of treatment which should only be used as a true last resort. Now, what is really the problem with invasive mechanical ventilation? Well, we hear about the horrifics of being intubated and placed into a coma, but let's discuss for a minute what happens during this period. Patients often are exposed to risks and complications. For example, the intubation process itself can injure a patient, but let's say we get through that part. Many patients do suffer from the buildup of bacteria in the tubing, and that's called ventilator-associated pneumonia when it becomes bacterial. Now, if that happens, you end up being treated for another week with antibiotics, and then the doctors have to go back to treating the original problem. So what that actually means is that a basic hospitalization or ICU visit of a week could end up being 2 weeks and more. And the worst part is that, as I mentioned, you still got to wean the patient off the machine. So as opposed to being on the mechanical for 3 or 4 days, they end up being on the machine for 10 days, which means you need another 8 to 10 days just to wean them off. So this is really a vicious circle, which means increased ICU occupancy, increased chances of additional risks. Now, another huge problem is called ventilator-induced lung injury, which is something that many patients experienced during COVID, because what COVID did is it attacked the lung walls, which means it kind of blocked the air sacs so that oxygen and ventilation couldn't occur between the lungs and the blood vessels. So what do you do when a membrane is blocked? You apply more pressure. And by applying more pressure, you face the risk of damaging and cracking the lung walls, just like we inflate a balloon. And this is a very common problem. It could reach 1 in 4 patients. So here again, when the doctors have identified a new problem, they've got to provide more antibiotics. They've got to extend the time on the machine, which extends the weaning, which only further creates more complications. Now, while this is all happening, the patient is in a coma, which means they're not moving very much, and they'll tend to suffer from muscle wastage, and they may develop bed sores or pressure wounds. And these issues can become very problematic and threaten a patient's life with a combination of the other elements occurring at that stage. And for this reason, we have contributing factors that, as a result, statistics will prove that invasive mechanical ventilation or patients on invasive mechanical ventilation have a 50% mortality rate. There is a 40% readmission rate. So we know, due to the respiratory problem and the treatment, there are lots of complications and a very poor patient outcome. I'm going to share with you a video about how the Inspira art is designed to work.
Most people take breathing for granted. After all, spontaneous breathing is a natural process that occurs whether we are awake or asleep. But for some people, every breath is a challenge. Over 400 million people suffer from respiratory insufficiency. Every year, nearly 20 million end up on respiratory life support, and millions die. Doctors facing patients with these treatment challenges administer supplemental oxygen using devices such as nasal cannulas. And when supplemental treatment is insufficient, their only option is to induce coma, intubate, and place the patient on mechanical ventilator that is not only expensive and complex to use, but puts the patient at high risk. This further emphasizes the huge gap between basic respiratory care and an intervention that should be used as a treatment of last resort. Inspira's early extracorporeal respiratory support system, the ART, bridges this gap, delivering the right level of care. Introducing Inspira's ART, the solution designed to boost oxygen saturation levels immediately. The treatment aims to be administered by a trained clinician, eliminating the need for ICU-level care. Let's understand how this breakthrough technology works. Inspira's dual lumen cannula is inserted into the jugular vein. Blood with low oxygen saturation is continuously drawn through the cannula's intake lumen into the ART. The innovative proprietary ART's pump circulates the blood at an optimal rate of 1,000 cc's per minute, while preventing thrombosis and hemolysis. The blood flows to the oxygenator, which oxygenates the blood and removes CO2, with only a minimal drop in blood pressure and low shear force, protecting the red blood cells. The oxygenated blood returns through the lumen to the jugular vein. Even though the ART treats blood in low volumes, it is expected to raise the patient's oxygen saturation to 95% or higher in 60 seconds. This device brings immediate relief to the patient while being easy to operate without the need for ICU expertise. Inspira's ART sets the new standard in respiratory care, bringing hope to millions.
So, thank you. So I'd like to share with you additional products that I discussed that we're developing and that are for our pipeline. We're also working on the Hyla blood sensor. Now, this blood sensor was originally designed for the Inspira ART in order to help us understand and manage what's happening within the blood. But obviously, after showing this with our Advanced Scientific Advisory Board, our world-renowned advisory board, it was decided to turn this into a standalone product. Now, what it is, it's a special sensor that is clipped over a tube with blood flowing through it. And it uses advanced algorithms in order to convert those images into key blood parameter measurements. And this is designed to be used during extracorporeal procedures. For example, if a patient is on ECMO or during a cardiopulmonary bypass operation, or in other words, an open heart operation. This system is designed to be affordable, using disposables. It's expected to go through a 510K procedure. And we expect that we'll be able to target about 1.2 procedures annually in the acute respiratory failure, the ECMOs, and the heart surgery arena. What's very unique about the sensor is that it's being designed to be non-invasive, which means it's got no direct no direct contact with the blood. So think about it today in a sense. With most apparatus out there today, you would have to take some type of a blood measurement, actually physically take the blood, or use something that's in contact with the blood, or you would have to do something which is extremely expensive. In other words, something that's part of very expensive systems. Here we're talking about a very affordable, low-cost system, a component that could be integrated, designed to be integrated with other systems. It will provide continuous, all the time and real-time measurements. And we're focusing on several key parameters that we believe are key when monitoring a patient that would have acute respiratory failure or some type of treatment that would require blood circulation. We believe that these key measurements would be able to provide key indications to the medical team and provide real-time information if there's a sudden change in the patient's condition so that they can move quickly and intervene and hopefully save a life or provide better treatment. We would also be able to use a system not only to monitor the blood coming out of the patient, but the blood returning to the patient from the system. And we can use this information to monitor if the system is functioning properly. So, for example, if an artificial lung or heart from a system is not functioning properly, we could potentially pick up on this from changes in the blood parameters. The system, again, will be designed to be standalone. It will be a key component within the ART system, but it's also being designed to be integrated with our ECMO machine, our CPB, cardiopulmonary bypass machine, the ALICE, which I'm about to present. So the ALICE is a very, very important machine. It's almost, it has a lot in common in a sense with some key components with our ART, because in a sense, if you read our F1 from 2021, we talk about releasing our augmented respiratory technology in a form that is limited to 510K, in other words, where it supports extracorporeal life support. And so this is a system that is able to circulate blood outside the body in order to provide pulmonary and cardio support. Again, this would be a 510K. And we believe that there's about a $700 million market, 50 to 20,000 procedures in the US, in about 337 hospitals. Now, this product is being designed to have additional unique features, a lot of focus about the transfer of patients within hospitals, which is a very big concern today and has very limited capabilities. And we believe by taking the ALICE and integrating it with the brains and the sensor capabilities of the HYLA, we're actually developing a new generation of system that would help provide pulmonary and cardio support with the ability to monitor what's happening within the blood at real time. A little overview of what we've achieved in recent months, just to give you a bit about our DNA and how we communicate with the market. So just looking back for the last about 3 months, we were granted a patent for a unique cannula. This patent was granted in the US. It's a unique dual lumen cannula with a very unique design. I'm very proud to say that there were about 19 claims approved in this patent. And it has a very unique capability that it can turn a single lumen into a dual lumen back and forth. And this could be very critical and important during certain procedures. Secondly, we signed a strategic OEM agreement with Terumo Cardiovascular, which is a division of the larger Terumo Corporation, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, whereby we would have access to a special component manufacturer to be used in our products. So I think this is also an endorsement of how Inspira is able to engage with large players within the medical industry. And I will say that Terumo is a very large player in the cardiopulmonary scene and the oxygenation arena. We also spoke about, we've already started the manufacturing of our ALICE system. The ALICE system is already going through V&V, verification validation. We're already manufacturing them, and it's planned to go through FDA approval this year. And we've just spoken about the human studies or the clinical research studies around the HYLA. I'll go into that in a moment. And you've even seen that in the last couple of months, we closed another strategic agreement for about $26 million around the HYLA. And this is part of about almost $500 million in preconditional distribution agreements that we have already set up both in Europe and in the US and Israel. So a little bit about our go-to-market strategy. Most of our products are designed on the razor blade. We want to make our income based on the disposables, almost $400, $500 million of distribution agreements. We already have strategic OEM agreement in place. We'll work towards additional agreements. We have collaboration with Sheba, which is the top 10, amongst the top 10 hospitals in the world. And we have already informed the market just a few days ago or a week ago that we have got approval to perform the HYLA studies in that location. And these studies are designed or planned to commence within the first quarter. We have a world-renowned KOLs, key opinion leaders, that continue to join our board. Amongst them, we have Professor Brody, which is the president of the Extracorporeal Life Support Organization. Why is that important? Because everything that's got to do with blood circulation is called extracorporeal. So we have the president of that community, of that society on our board. And again, we are planning lots of clinical related studies. We have the HYLA to kick off in the first quarter. We talk about doing the Inspira Art in the second half of next year, and an additional more advanced study in 25 for the Inspira Art. So a quick overview of our timeline. And this is very important for you, for the viewers and for the listeners. Based on the HYLA, we have a clinical study up to 100 patients starting this quarter. we talk about informing about the start, the update, the completion of the studies. This product will then go through a V&V, the final build, and then to a submission in 24. And hopefully later 24, we'll have FDA clearance, and then in 25 be in the market. For the ALICE, the ECMO, the ECLS, we're talking about verification validation as we speak, going through FDA submission already in the second half in just a couple of months. Hopefully FDA approval by the beginning of 2024 and into deployment and sales. For the ART, the Inspira ART, the amazing system being designed to prevent the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. We've had great news of the cannula patent recently. You saw the effects in the market and how the market responded excitedly. We talk about a pre-submission meeting with the FDA in the second half of this year, doing a preclinical investigation, and we will get the results of the Inspira ART patent. Now, why is this here? Because it's not just any patent. This patent has several key components that have been filed for patenting, but there's also a patent there for the intent of use. In other words, we have filed to get approval, to get a patent that we can use our system in an extracorporeal. In other words, we can use our system using direct blood oxygenation to prevent the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. We have filed for that procedure. Should we be granted with that procedure, you can understand the potential impact that would have on the market and our ability to be a strong player in that area, and how this would potentially prevent anybody from penetrating that market. So it's not just the technology. We're filing a patent on the market in the US. I do want to emphasize in the US. This product in 2024 is designed to go to V&V, additional studies, and then in 2024, the second half, we hopefully will be placing the system in the first group of humans, followed by a much larger group. With regard to our patent families, we have several patent families. It's groups of patents in each family. We have around a device called the fixation device. We have the dual lumen cannula, which is approved in the US. And now all eyes are on family number 3, the extracorporeal oxygenation system, the ART, the Inspira ART, both the technology and the method of use, or the intent of use, or in brackets, the market. From a cash point of view, our last reports showed that we had 16.2 million in September, going through almost $1 million a month. So we can understand that we entered 2022 with about $30 million upwards in cash, and we're going to about $900,000 a month. So we definitely have runway in order to go through the clinical studies, the research clinical studies, the FDA submissions, and potentially up to the FDA clearance of the ALICE. So thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you. We are now going to open up the call for questions. Participants should indicate that they have a question by using the raise hand tool. I will then enable you to speak. You may also type in your question using the Q&A tool. Joe, it seems like we do have some questions here from the YouTube live stream. What kind of sales can you expect from the HYLA?
Okay, so in a sense, it's always about market penetration, but we do talk about 1.2 million procedures a year that we see as a potential in the US market or even globally. That's quite a big number. Take into consideration that every system could be sold for thousands of dollars, every disposable maybe even hundreds of dollars. It's a very, very low cost for the value it provides, and we can do the multiplication. These are very low interest. We also believe that the system could be integrating additional products in the market, not just the ALICE, but maybe even competitor products. So we believe that over time, this will obviously be a very strong player, potentially multi-million-dollar revenue capability. I don't want to say how high, but it has a lot of potential.
Matthew Hammond asks, will you submit the dual lumen cannula for FDA approval as a standalone component?
There is always potential. If you look at our F1, we talk about taking components and filing them individually so that they can provide additional revenue streams. The company will think about that and inform the market per decisions that are made.
Harold Weber asks, what needs to happen to trigger the orders? I assume you're referencing the sales process, Harold?
Right. So in order to, if we talk about distribution agreements, so we have distribution agreements with companies in Europe, in the US. In a sense, when you have a product, you should most probably want to start a deployment plan. You would want to infiltrate those products. You make sure that those systems get used in a field setting. And if there's a good response, then you would potentially start generating orders, which means, and that's what basically drive the pace and the quantity. We have distributors with their hands up saying, we want to take these products to market. We want to take a piece. We want exclusivity, and we would like to take responsibility for certain quantities. But of course, there has to be a balance between the distributor wanting to buy products to the fact that there's actually demand. So it works hand in hand. But that's what we plan to do. And I do want to emphasize, Inspira does manage a lot of relationships, dialogue with large medical device companies. You can see that through our agreement with Terumo. So our strategy would be to team up with a very strong player and enter the market with that player.
Here's another question from our YouTube live stream, sort of backtracking here onto the sales strategy. Will you end up partnering with a sales firm, or are you going to hire salespeople, or are we just going to rely on the relationships that you've built?
When you run it, I would say I don't want to say Inspira. I'll just talk in a very generic way. I would recommend for any company in this field to always, you have to keep pushing forward as if you stand alone and develop those relationships. So you're always ready for the market penetration. So Inspira has different things in place. We have key opinion leaders. We have distribution agreements. We have other elements that we are working towards so that we would be able to walk into the hospitals and walk towards deploying those systems to start creating traction. Parallel, we are working on developing relationships with large players in the arena.
An anonymous attendee has asked if we have any brochures or a PowerPoint delivered after this webinar. I would point you to IINNinfo.com. There you can download the investor presentation as well as the fact sheet.
Correct. It was filed on February 6th. If you go into the SEC filings, look on February 6th, the FWP, you will have access to the presentation.
Here's another question. Can you elaborate further on the agreement you have with Terumo? Are there any milestone payments or cash advances based on the success of your FDA filings?
So I can only stay within what's being reported. What's being reported is that we have a strategic agreement with Terumo Cardiovascular division of the larger Terumo Corporation in the US. Basically, that agreement states that we have an agreement for the manufacture of a key component which is used for the circulation of blood during the oxygenation process. More than that, I cannot share with anybody because it hasn't been published, but we work towards developing relationships. And you would understand, I think the public understands that for a large corporation like that to join up with Inspira, it may have a certain level of reflection.
And here's another question from Mark. For how many days can the ART system be in place to treat RDS?
So the system designed to be in place, it is expected to be used for a couple of days. If we look at what happens in invasive mechanical ventilation, if there are no complications, the patient's normally on the system for about a week. So it's about 4 days of intubation and coma and about 3 days of weaning. When there are complications, it becomes 2, 3, 4 weeks. So we believe that doctors need anything up to about a week to be able to treat the underlying medical problem. The system would be designed to from an FDA process, anything above 6 hours. In other words, it's called long term, so it could be days, even more. But we will see, obviously, with the studies, what will be the defined or recommended timeline. But again, we must remember the whole idea of our systems and systems that provide respiratory support is to provide the doctors the window of opportunities, those critical days, so that they can actually work on the underlying medical problem.
Joe, I'm seeing another question here about the Terumo agreement.
Yes.
They ask, can you discuss the royalty agreement further with Terumo? What is the royalty arrangement per product sold? I would assume this would also fall underneath the non-public category.
So it has not, in nowhere has anybody mentioned that we have a royalty agreement with Terumo. So I'm not sure where that came from, but we have no publicly known or known royalty agreement with Terumo.
Joe, I'm not seeing any more questions in the queue. Perhaps you would like to wrap up the call by giving an essential value proposition to the attendees today. Why should investors take an interest in Inspira?
All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. I think, you should go and look at our deck. You'll understand also from what's been said today. I think we've given the public a very clear picture of what we're doing every single 6 months, the 2-3 years ahead, by product, the different procedures. You can see, one would see, you could go back a few months and see what milestones we have. We've bought a lot of distribution agreements. We've created a relationship, a formal relationship with a large medical player. We're already going to human clinical research studies on one product, the Hyla. We're going with a second product this year to the FDA. We have patents, really high-level patents that we expect that have received results in the US, positive results, and we believe there will be additional potential results in the US. So there's a lot of news flow this year. And I've only just shared with you what is potentially medically related, not business or commercially related. Hopefully we have that as well. We will surprise the market like we like to always. And we've also given you a very clear outlook of what's going to be happening in the next 36 months. So I think that gives you an indication about our DNA and how we look at things and how we focus and how all these products are going to work hand in hand to developing our position within this growing market. So we are talking about entering sales. We're talking about regulatory approvals, medical data this year, and already reaching sales next year and the following, year by year, penetrating another market into the different market segments. So I think you can get an idea that should everything work as planned, you can see extreme and strategic growth within the respiratory care market.
Thank you, Joe. For more information on Inspira Technologies, reach us at 1-800-RedChip. That's 1-800-733-2447. Please use RedChip's investor information page for Inspira Technologies, IINN.info.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts. Please be sure to visit the Inspira Technologies website. It's inspira-technologies.com. Thanks again, participants, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.